story reinforced by Moran's on-camera interview with al-Hadiri on the giant Australian Broadcasting Corporation was soon being dispersed by the White House and their administration. It was being repeated in television and newspapers around the world. It was the first in a large line of hyped and fraudulent stories that would eventually propel the United States into a war with Iraq. The first war based almost entirely on a covert propaganda campaign targeting the media. Weapons of mass destruction was only a small part of the strategic influence and marketing campaign conducted around the world. Another major thrust of the propaganda campaign was to make the conflict with Iraq seem as a battle between good and evil. Terrorism was the evil, and we were the good guys. The plan was to connect Saddam Hussein in Iraq with the attacks of September 11th, and make the American people that Saddam Hussein was behind those attacks. Staying ahead of the news cycle is again where the Rending Group comes into play. The Rending Group created an information war room to monitor worldwide news reports at lightning speed and respond almost instantly with counter-propaganda. The group was able to know what would be put out on the news wires hours beforehand. This enabled them to put their own spin on what was being reported, essentially controlling the world's view of reality. There was also an alarming story by Paul Wolfowitz from a White House paper that he gave in a meeting of the Council on Foreign Relations. The paper warned that Iraqi engineers were preparing a vast attack on our country's computer networks. The warning came from a single source that claimed Iraq's intelligence service was working with the Babylon Software Company to break into U.S. computers, steal documents, and spread viruses. There were no such attacks. There was no such program. Again, this is only propaganda spread by Bush's regime. In the lead up to the war with Iraq, Bush and the American people were told repeatedly, Bush told the American people repeatedly that Iraq had Scud missiles capable of striking Israel. In October 2002, a CIA report determined that evidence for the existence of Iraqi Scuds was inconclusive. Nonetheless, the idea of these missiles had become accepted as far as Washington was concerned, and the live Scuds continued to be broadcast all around the world. When the invasion began, Iraq began firing what the Pentagon called Scud-type missiles. These rockets were not Scuds at all. There were no Scuds ever found. And for 3 days they kept this story alive, that there were Scuds. The government's argument against the lie was the sheer tenacity of the fight the Iraqis were posing near a compound at Al-Qaim. They said this led them to believe that the Iraqis might be defending Scud missiles hidden at the site. No Scuds were ever found. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found at Al-Qaim. The CIA's October 2002 report also claimed that Iraq had converted some J-29 jet fighters to deliver chemical and biological weapons. George W. Bush quickly seized on this idea for a speech that he gave in Cincinnati. He told the astonished crowd there that Saddam's poison-laden aircraft were capable of reaching U.S. soil. On June 15, 2003, though, an Air Force team in Iraq finally seized these drones. A subsequent investigation by the U.S. Air Force determined that the drone's only possible mission was for picture taking. The government's argument to this matter is that we are better safe than sorry. They said if Iraq had weapons capable of hitting U.S. soil, that the people needed to know. But what then is the explanation of why the people of the U.S. needed to be made aware of possible threats? Why wouldn't they wait until they had some proof before sending an entire nation into a frenzy? Obviously, Obviously, these picture-taking drones were never capable of hitting the U.S. soil. The answer again is easy. Propaganda aimed only at creating an illusion. The last point I'll speak about is the fabricated story of the procurement of uranium-enriched centrifuge tubes capable of producing nuclear or atomic weapons. The CIA learned that Saddam was attempting to purchase aluminum tubes capable of being reconfigured and used to enrich uranium. These tubes were intercepted, and specialists sent to examine them concluded from their technical properties that they had only one possible use, as casings for rotors in centrifuges used to enrich uranium, which is a key step in producing an atomic bomb. My point here circles back to Judith Miller of the New York Times. Miller co-wrote the story implying that Iraq's purchase of uranium tubes was proof that Saddam was trying to build atomic weapons. On Sunday, September 8, 2002, the Times led with a story written by Miller. The headline this time read, U.S. says Hussein intensifies quest for A-bombs parts. Cheney and other administration officials then cited this article as validation for their case against Iraq. Both in Miller's article and in TV appearances, administration officials told the American people that they couldn't wait for the smoking gun proof of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction to be a mushroom cloud. The aluminum tube story was later debunked by U.S. Energy Department officials and State Department analysts. But it remained a terrifying argument as George W. Bush stampeded the Congress and our country into a war. The thought of nuclear weapons could not be ignored whether it was true or false. The only point they had here was to impose fear into the minds of a nation looking for revenge into the terrorist attacks of September 11th. After all the lies were told and came to light, the final outcome was success for the Bush administration and the Rendon Group. Their only purpose from the start was to use propaganda to convince the world that removing Saddam Hussein from power would solve the issue of world peace and terrorism threats to our country. They made us believe that we would be a safer nation if we went to war, removed Saddam, and restored the peace. We bought every one of their stories, hook, line, and sinker. We never questioned anything we were told. The truth is, we were lied to by the leaders of our country by reasons we may never completely understand. What we do know is the reasons we went to war are not the reasons we were told. What sounded like a fairy tale in the beginning is a nightmare we are now living in. One argument that could be raised is that why the Bush administration would release to the media, why would the Bush administration release information to the media well knowing that it would later be debunked? The answer is simple. If 20 million people watch the headline news and see a story that Saddam Hussein is building atomic weapons, 20 million people are ready to go to war. When the truth of the story comes out and is told on some obscure television station or buried in the 30th page of the newspaper, maybe 20,000 people hear the true story. The administration has then covered their behinds, gained the support of nearly 20 million people. The end result is then they get ahead. It is undeniable that the Rendon Group, the media, and the Bush administration are responsible for the lies that we as Americans were made to believe. Judith Miller, the New York Times reporter that told most of these lies, was eventually sentenced to jail for not exposing the sources of the lies she reported. They convinced us we would be a safer nation, stronger and more united if we granted them an $80 billion budget to go to war in Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein. They told us it would be quick and there would be little loss of life. From the beginning we have been fed nothing but lies, propaganda, and we are still being fed. Hopefully, we as a nation can realize the devastation caused by believing what our government tells us without any question. The real reasons we went to war, we will never know. Will you let yourself be lied to again? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Please don't let yourself be fooled again.